She's no Stanley, but she definitely keeps my water cold. Hey, what's up? Hello. If you're new here, my name is Kayla and you are watching Kayla's Bookish Vibes. So thank you to everyone who has taken the time out to click the subscribe button. I really appreciate it more than you know. As you can tell by the title, today we're going to be talking about audiobooks. I'm a huge fan of audiobooks and I am one of the people who counts reading with your ears as reading. Even if you listen to the book, if you took in the information, I count it towards reading. So I wanted to give you all some of my favorite thrillers that I have read on audio. I do consume a lot of thrillers every month, but that is because the majority of the time I'm listening to them on audio while I'm working or cooking or while I'm doing chores. That's usually how I consume the thrillers that I read. So I thought, why not give you all a list of some of the books that I really enjoyed on audio. The first book on my list is going to be The Night Swim. This is by Megan Golden and it is part of her Rachel Crawl series. Now Rachel is a podcaster. Specifically, she is a true crime podcaster. She has recently become famous for her podcast. Now Rachel is very intentional about not allowing her face to be out there, so she doesn't take photos. She just is known by her voice. So she's surprised when one day she goes to her car and there's a note on her car asking her for help to solve a case. So now Rachel is being followed by someone who wants her help on an investigation. I really loved this book on audio because the podcast aspect of it, when you're listening to the chapters that are podcasts, it sounds like you're really listening to a true crime podcast. Now, I will say there is a second book in the Crawl series, and I did also listen to that on audio, and it's not as good as the first one. I don't know if it's just because the audiobook is not as good, or because the second book overall I didn't enjoy as much. But I will say the first book, The Night Swim, is really good on audio. Now my next recommendation is not just one specific book, but rather an author. Any book, I believe, by S.A. Cosby will be really good on audio. The last book that I read by him on audio was All the Sinners Bleed. That is his newest release. This book is about a black sheriff and a serial killer in a small town. So we start off with a school shooting, so trigger warning, because I know that can be very triggering, especially in today's time. So we start off with a school shooting. Now I will say that aspect of the story is very small. It's not like what the story is about. The story is really about a black sheriff and a serial killer, but the school shooting is just how this book starts off. I won't give you too much more, but I will say that the narrator of this book does an amazing job. It's just the sound, the grovelly sound of his voice goes so well with like the gritty writing nature of S.A. Cosby. He writes super visual thrillers. I keep doing this because it's like a texture almost to his writing, but the person who narrates his books also has that texture in his voice, and it's a match made in heaven. I highly recommend that any book by S.A. Cosby you should read on audio, because I do believe the same man narrates all of his books. The next book I have is None of This Is True by Lisa Jewell. This is my third book by Miss Lisa Jewell, and I have to say this is probably the only one that I have given 5 stars. Her other books have been pretty mid to me, but this one is definitely worth the read, and especially on audio. Now in this book, we are following 2 ladies, Alex and Josie. Alex has a podcast. Again, another thriller with a podcast element. However, Alex's podcast isn't a true crime podcast. In her podcast, she interviews women who had done great things to change their life or to turn their life around. Well, one day, Alex is in a bar with her husband and her friends, and she's celebrating her birthday. She goes to the bathroom, and when she goes to the bathroom, a lady named Josie approaches her and says, "Hey, I realize you're celebrating your birthday. Today's my birthday also. We're birthday twins." And she's like,
"Oh, yay, cool."
A few days later, they bump into each other again on the street. Coincidence? Alex is being polite and they're making small talk when Josie tells her, like, "Hey, I listened to your podcast. I know that you interview women who have changed their lives. I haven't changed my life yet, but I'm on the precipice. Like, I'm right at the cusp of doing so, and I think you should interview me because this will be something that you'll want to interview." Alex thinks about it and ends up agreeing to do so. As things are revealed in the podcast, she realized that Josie has been hiding some very dark secrets. This is so good because not only is there a podcast element, there is also a documentary element, and it's amazing. I'm not going to say anything more than that because I don't want to give anything away in the story, but all I can say is you should pick this book up, and specifically you should read it on audio. It was so good. The next book I have is Lone Woman by Victor Lavelle. I really enjoyed this one. This was my first horror novel that I've ever read, and I read it on audio. Now this is a super atmospheric read. It takes place in the West, and we're following a woman who has something in her trunk. This trunk is sacred to her. She keeps it locked, and no one under any circumstances should open this trunk. Now I say atmospheric because she is alone, hence the title Lone Woman, but she's in like a very wide open space in a small town that's like in the middle of nowhere. It's just very deserted almost, and you really feel like you're in the Midwest back in the day when it was like being settled. I loved this book on audio. I really loved the deeper meaning behind this book. But I will say what I loved the most about this audio was just the atmosphere of it all. I feel like I don't think I would have enjoyed it as much had I read it physically on my own. Next two books I'm going to recommend. I'm recommending them because they are very short and you can read them in a day on audio. So these are like the perfect books to read while you're working or while you're like deep cleaning your house, and before you know it, the book is over. The first book is When the Reckoning Comes by LaTanya McQueen. In this book, we are following Mira. Mira has received an invite out of the blue from a childhood friend inviting her to her wedding. Now, Mira has left her childhood town because it was small and segregated and she wanted to escape, forgetting everyone that she left behind there. However, when she receives this invite, she decides to attend the wedding. The only problem is the wedding is on a plantation. Now there is blood-soaked history on the land the plantation sits on, and things get very eerie very fast. I loved this book. It was so quick. I started reading it while I was working one day, and after I finished my shift and I was folding some laundry, I looked up and the book was done. But it was so good. This is a perfect read for like the October fall spooky season. I highly recommend this one. Now the next short book that I'm going to recommend is My Sister, the Serial Killer. So in this book we are following Corday. Corday is a nurse and she has this crush on the doctor that works in her office. She really likes this doctor. She thinks he's so handsome and so sweet. However, she also has a sister, a younger sister, who is absolutely beautiful, stunning. The only problem with this sister is she seems to keep killing her boyfriends. Whenever something happens or something goes wrong, instead of breaking up with these boyfriends, somehow they mysteriously end up dead. Now, who does she call? Corday. And Corday comes to help clean up her sister's mess every single time. One day, while her sister is visiting her at work, she sees the doctor. Corday knows how all of the relationships end up for her sister. And like I said, Corday has a crush of her own on this doctor. So the last thing she wants is to have to clean up her sister's mess when it comes to this doctor. I really enjoyed this one. There was almost a humor to it, but also if you are an older sister, I feel like it's some commentary there that you could really resonate with. I highly recommend this one. It was really short and it is another one that you could finish in one day. The last book I'm going to recommend is actually the book that I recently finished, which is The Reformatory by Tanner Reed Dew. I gave this book 5 stars. Now, I read this book 50-50, 50% physically and 50% audio, and I would still recommend to read this on audio for several reasons. One, this book is very heavy. There's some very serious commentary about the boys' reformatory school that is mentioned in this book. And I think if you read it on audio, it may be easier to get through some of those hard parts because you can stop it and play it whenever you feel like maybe you're getting overwhelmed. You can pause it and then come back to it. So in this book, we are following 2 siblings. We have Gloria and we have Robert. Gloria is around 15 and Robert is around 12. We learn very early on that their parents are not in the picture. Unfortunately, their mother has died from cancer and their father is on the run from the law. So this leaves Gloria to take care of her little brother. One day while Gloria is walking him to school, they come across a young man named McCormick. I can't remember his first name, but I know his last name is McCormick. And unfortunately, he starts to make some unwanted advances towards Gloria. In an effort to protect his sister, Robert kicks this young white boy in the knee. Now, this is taking place in the 1950s in the South. We're in Florida, and if you know, you know. Robert is sent to the Reformatory school for 6 months as punishment for kicking this boy. While he's in the school, Gloria is doing everything she can to get him out of the school because she understands that not everyone who goes to the school makes it out alive. This book is so eerie, so heavy, so haunting. There's actually ghosts in this book, and I think the reason I really enjoyed it on audio is because there is one specific ghost that makes several appearances, and I really enjoyed the way the narrator portrayed this ghost in the book. In the beginning, it's a very almost sweet character, and then as the story progresses, he becomes the opposite of sweet. But I think the narrator does an amazing job at depicting the character development of this ghost. I highly recommend this one on audio. All right, guys, those are all the audiobook recommendations that I have for you today that are in the thriller genre. If any of those books sounded interesting to you, then I highly recommend that you support your local library and use the Libby or the Hoopla app to get your audiobooks. Thank you so much for watching until the very end. If you enjoyed it, please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you all in my next video. Bye.